Welcome to the Royal Ranger Podcast, where we are talking about all things Royal Rangers and building an effective discipleship ministry for boys in your church. I'm Karl Flight, the National Director for Royal Rangers USA, and my co-host is John Hicks, the National Programs and Curriculum Coordinator. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Let's jump into it. How are you doing, John?
I am doing good. We're surviving. We just had that Every One conference a couple weeks ago, and that went really well.
Yes, it did. That was great.
But we're still recovering from that.
Yes.
Those events always go really well, and they're really enjoyable, but there's a lot of work that goes on.
It was neat to have girls ministry involved in that conference with us.
Yeah, it really was.
So a lot of the focus and all where we were going kind of goes along with the topic we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, some of you may have heard that we have added I guess you would call it a nomenclature. Mm-hmm. Would that be the correct term, I imagine?
It sounds like a good word.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it means, but it really sounds good.
It sounds official. But we've added the phrasing of National Boys Ministry to the Royal Ranger departmental name. And I know that there's been some questions. Why do we do that? And all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard about that, haven't you?
Yeah, I heard something about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially when they changed the nameplate on the wall outside of our office. So
there
yes.
you go. Yes. Yeah. But it's important to know that we're the ones that initiated that change out of the National Ranger Office, just because we felt that this was an incredible way for us, or a very intentional way for us to be able to fulfill our mission, which says, you remember the vision of Royal Rangers, John?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The vision of Royal Rangers is to influence more boys than ever, more effectively than ever. And that's really what the passion and the heartbeat behind all of this is we want to position ourselves to where we can help everyone reach boys, because that's our goal. That's what we're looking to do,
exactly.
is reach more boys than we've ever reached before. And in our day and age today, we really need to double down on that.
Mm-hmm. And that's always been our objective. I mean, from the beginning, we used to say that our mission was to reach, teach, and keep boys for Christ. And then it changed to evangelize, equip, and empower. But it's always been the same process. It's reaching more boys and discipling them up into being godly men, and then engaging them in service to their community and in their church and elsewhere. So it's that same process. That's never changed. That's always been our mission. And Royal Rangers has always been kind of the primary tool that we use to do that. But for various reasons, we recognize that there is a significant number of churches that are just simply not using Royal Rangers, and we want to provide something for them so that we can honestly say to every church, we have something for you. Our goal, obviously, would be that every church, every Assembly of God church, would have some form of ministry to boys in their church. Right. And there's a variety of different ways that you can do that. Some of them, obviously one option is the full-fledged Royal Ranger program as we know and love. And there are many benefits to that. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's kind of like the Cadillac version of ministry to boys. But in some churches, for various reasons, they may feel like that's not the best option for them today. So we want to be able to communicate to all of our pastors, all of our churches, and say, even if you feel like you can't do the full version of Rangers, we have other options available to you. So it's absolutely not intended to be a diminishing aspect of Royal Rangers, or putting Royal Rangers aside, or Royal Rangers isn't as important as it used to be. That's not at all what the intention is. It's just we're just recognizing the reality that there are many churches that are looking for something else, and we want to provide that.
And that's a huge point, because I know I've been asked that question. Well, is this an alternative to Royal Rangers? And I don't know that it's not a program. There's not a set program. It's not like you can do this or you can do this. The Boys Ministry program, if you will, of the Assemblies of God is Royal Rangers. Yeah. And that's not changing.
Right, exactly. And I think that's an important distinction that we may want to clarify too is, what is a program? Because I think sometimes people think, they're creating a new program. Well, how do you define program? Well, I would define a program as being something where you create resources and materials that are intentionally structured in such a way that there's a process that you go through in discipling boys or training leaders, and this piece has to be done before you do that piece, and you got to complete this way and such. So Royal Rangers is a program. I mean, it's a ministry, obviously, but
doubt.
it's a program because we have pieces where, there's a certain way the meeting is supposed to be structured. There's a certain way that leader training is done. You've got to do this color of merit in order to get this advancement step, and you got to get this step before you can get that step, and this step before you get that medal. And, there's a process to it. There are pieces that are intentionally structured in such a way that it leads you through a specific path and process to get you to a specific defined end goal objective. And that's a program. That's a program. But what we're talking about with these other resources, and the reason why we say these other resources that we've created are not a program, is that it doesn't do any of that. We're just creating pieces that a church can use, kind of like when you go into the Chinese buffet, you choose what you're going to eat. You're going to have the spicy chicken over here, or the spicy beef over there, or the fried rice or whatever. You choose what you want to eat, but nobody's going to stand there and say, oh no, you got to put some of this on your plate and some of that, and you got to eat this before you eat that. No, it's like you choose what those pieces are. And that's what we're trying to do, is create those menu items that the church can choose from. And then we provide them with instruction on, we say, here's the recommended process, here's the recommended pieces, and here's the reason why we recommend them. But it's totally up to that church to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it.
One of my concerns as I'm traveling and I go through is, when you look, there's so little out there for mentoring a boy into a Christ-like man.
Yep.
There's some other programs out there that will be focused on boys and all of that, but that will systematically walk a boy through the process of becoming a Christ-like man. And so as we look at that option, or as we look at that lack that's out there, we recognize that what we have is we know that material for 63 years now. Is that right? 63? Something like that. 63, 64 years. We have been mentoring boys, so we know how to do that. But the tragedy is for a church is if they don't think that, hey, we want to do the program. And for a lot of our churches, they still don't know that you can customize Royal Rangers to fit the structure of your church. You can customize the complexity of it and all of the different steps and all of that. But have you ever walked down the aisle of at a conference center? You're walking through the hallway and you got all the vendors lined up on the side, and you don't really want to look at the vendors because if you do, it's like walking through Sam's Club and the guy at the T-Mobile station. I don't want to talk to you about cell phones. So
or the arcade at the fair. It's like, don't make eye contact. Like, hey, you go here. You try this. You try this.
And sometimes it feels a little bit. Here we have all this knowledge, and we know how to reach boys. We know how to work with them and how to mentor them. But a church is afraid to. They don't know where to go to get that help. They're not ready to do Rangers for whatever reason, but boy, they really want to do something. And I remember as a youth pastor, we did some very intentional things for our boys and our girls. They weren't the program of Royal Rangers, but we would take 1 month, 4 weeks, twice a year, into spring and into fall, and we would take our boys and I would take my male youth leaders, and we would do a 4-week series with those boys, on topics that are just pertinent to boys, while my wife and the girl leaders all took the girls and did one there for them. Highlight of our time together. Well, I learned those resources, I learned those skills, those kind of things through the ministry of Royal Rangers. Well, we know how to do that, and so we don't want churches just not knowing where to go. And so by adding Boys Ministry to our name, basically we're saying we're here. We are Royal Rangers. We have the program of that. But at the same time, if you want information on how to reach boys, and obviously girls ministry would have information on how to reach girls, but if you want information on how to reach boys outside of the program, we're still your people.
Yeah.
Still come and talk to us, because however we can reach boys, our vision is to reach those boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's a big piece.
So let's kind of talk a little bit about what our plans are in terms of how do we plan to implement this? How's it going to be represented? What are we going to do on the national level? And then we can talk a little bit more on what would we recommend or hope that the districts would do to implement the same concept?
Sure. Yeah. So as you've already said, the first thing we're doing is and this is an important piece, we're creating resources. So in our office here, we have our training that is program specific. We have Ranger Foundations, and we have all the different pieces that we have that are to train our men on how to do the program of Royal Rangers. And when you go through Foundations and you go through those different pieces, you're getting very specific training. But one of the things we have done is we've also created what will eventually replace Ranger Essentials, but we've created a new resource that we're calling the Boys Ministries Leader Manual or Leader Guide that we're creating, that is going to focus on the ministry or the specifics of ministering to a boy. Things that we used to have in our manual and have, that we want to really focus on, but we're going to do it in a very intentional way with ministry, such as how to lead a boy to Christ, how to pray with a boy, learning styles and characteristics of boys of different ages, some of those kind of things. Things that are focused on ministering to a boy, not necessarily on the program that ministers to boys, but on the actual ministry to boys.
Mm-hmm. Something that kind of goes beyond Rangers. It would fit in any setting, children's church or
Absolutely.
Youth ministries,
Yeah.
or any setting where you're ministering to boys.
Yeah, it would allow that knowledge base for someone who wants to know how to do it. Because, like, for example, with a boy, if you're going to sit down and you're going to talk with a boy, you're not going to sit him in a circle necessarily like you would with girls and just have this conversation. They're going to have a hard time sitting there, but you're going to do activities with them, and you're going to, and so just helping them understand those unique characteristics for ministering to a boy in an effective way.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're creating some resources and all. These are resources that will be utilized by the Ranger ministry, but also resources that will be utilized by churches that aren't doing the Ranger ministry, but still want to figure out how can I minister to a boy.
Yeah. So a lot of this content will be very familiar to Ranger leaders who've been around a while. It's not necessarily new concepts, because like everything you just mentioned are things that your typical Ranger leader probably heard in training years ago.
Yeah.
So we're just so really what we're doing is we're kind of separating the Ranger program specific content from the ministry content. So a Ranger leader will take both, because obviously he's got to take both.
Yes.
But the guy who is doing a form of ministry to boys in his church that isn't necessarily Royal Rangers, he would take the ministry side, but not necessarily the program side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about how effective that is when all of a sudden we have our churches who maybe before, because they weren't ready to do Rangers or whatever the reason was, now all of a sudden we're putting tools in their hands that allows them to be able to minister to a boy, to meet the needs of that boy, to speak to the question that boy has, do I have what it takes to be a man, who understand the uniquenesses of that young man and how to be able to minister to him, and hopefully bring him on that pathway towards being a Christ-like man. Mm-hmm. And doing that. So it's more than just it's just that next step. It's that next level, if you will, of being able to double down and reach our boys.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
huge for us.
So there's the leader guide that you mentioned. Then we're also talking about creating what we're calling activity guides, which is essentially skill merits. And in the Ranger world, they're skill merits. But in the non-Ranger side, it would be more of activity guides. And then Bible lessons, many of the same types of Bible lessons that you can use in a Ranger outpost can also be used in a non-Ranger group.
Absolutely.
Leadership materials, same kind of thing. So a lot of the resources that we currently already have, as well as new things that will be developed, will be additional pieces that will be developed, can be created for useful for both sides. And I think that's a key point, like you mentioned before, that we're not having a body of resources for the Royal Ranger audience and a separate body of resources for the non-Ranger audience. It's really the same resources. Everyone uses the same material. It's just that this material isn't necessarily geared specifically for a Ranger audience. So
the program piece.
For those pieces. Yeah.
So it's one of the things that's got me most excited, because you can use it on both sides. But a church that wants to do an outreach in their community, and they want to find a way to help dads and sons or men and boys come together, And so one of those resources might be we're creating a weekend outreach. We've talked a lot about and we can talk about adventure camps here in a minute, if those for that too. But take a resource like rocketry. One of our merits. We could take that merit and we can break it out over 4 weeks, and you would have 3 weeks where you're talking about rocketry, you're building a rocket with your son, you can bring them in. It's kind of like that Lowe's event. You know, when you go to Lowe's on a Saturday and you're building the birdhouse, you buy the kit and then they give you all the tools and the paint and you and your son get to build that kit together and then, you know, you've done something and it's created that. But even for like our church plants or whatever that want to have impact into their community, that's what an incredible resource and tool that they could use, you know, for 3 Saturdays, whether it's one Saturday a month for 3 months or whatever, they could come together, build rocketries. There's opportunity to talk about parenting. There's opportunity to talk about Christ. There's opportunity to talk about family, those kind of things that put some practical tools in the hands of that dad while they're doing something fun together, shoulder to shoulder. And then on that 4th Saturday, they go out to the park and they all shoot off their rockets, you know, but you've just created, and in the meantime, you've built relationship with these individuals as well as that father and that son have built relationship. I mean, so there's just so many different ways that we could utilize this focus in a powerful way to reach boys and to make a difference in families and in churches around our country.
Yeah, and it provides the typical church with a variety of options that he can choose from. You know, if for whatever reason they feel like they can't do Rangers, now you've given them another option of something else that they can do, another way that they can reach boys in their community and connect with dads in their community.
Yeah. So let's talk about the structure a little bit because I know that's going to be a question. How does a district do it? Like in the national office, we've looked at different options, and we're not creating 2 different departments. We don't have a boys ministry department and we have a Royal Ranger department, but we're one and the same. As Royal Ranger leaders, we understand that our focus is boys. And so we're ready to put on either hat. If you want to talk to us about how to reach a boy, we can sit down and talk about how to reach a boy without touching the program piece of it. But if you're looking for the program, man, we're ready to talk about that piece too. And so we're doing that. So even in the district, I think our recommendation would be for a district, the implementation in a district is to do the same thing. Our ranger leaders, our district ranger leaders, they're ready to step up and be the boys ministry experts because they know, as we talked about already, they know the building blocks, they know the tools, they know the different things that are necessary. And so our recommendation on a district level would be that rather than creating a separate department, because that department, we've actually had a district or 2 that have tried that, you know, where they've had tried to create a separate department and have a separate director for boys ministry and then have a separate director for the Royal Ranger ministry. The challenge with that is there's not a lot out there for boys ministry. And so, you know, what we've seen is that in a very short time, 6-8 months, that department kind of folds up and closes down. And then the tragedy of that is there's a sense of, oh, well, we can't do boys ministry. Well, no, that's not the solution. It's combined, you know that your ranger guys are ready to help you, you know, without having to force you to look at Royal Rangers if that's not where you're at. They're ready to help you as a pastor, as a church, to minister to those boys in your district. A lot of our events, our summer powwows, what we used to call them, and of course they have different names in different districts now, those are being structured so that you can come to that whether you're doing Royal Rangers or not. But come and have a great weekend where you're hanging out with a bunch of other men and boys, have some messages that are geared right down the line for a young man, you know, and understand what manhood is. Let the boys in your church experience what it's like to hang out with a bunch of men and boys who are going after God on a Wednesday or on a Friday night, you know, in the outdoors and to do fun activities and all of that. And you can be a part of that event, even if it was a quote unquote a Ranger event, because most of what happens there is more focused on developing that boy as a man than it is on the program of Royal Rangers.
Yeah, so a big part of what districts do, districts really probably spend the bulk of their time doing 2 things. One is they conduct events, and the other is they do leader training. So when it comes to events, as we've kind of described it before, you know, we kind of see that districts generally will do 3 different types of events. So in other words, you've got one type of event would be Royal Ranger events that are really only for a Royal Ranger audience. I mean, there are some events that would be like that. So like, for example, your FCF events. You know, if you're going to go to a spring trace or a frontier adventure or a fall trace or a national rendezvous, you're either going to have to be an FCF member or be joining FCF in order to go into that. So that's really for a Ranger audience. There may be other events like our junior training academies. Those are pretty much Royal Ranger events for a Ranger audience, because if a boy goes to JTC, for example, he's going to be learning a lot about the Royal Ranger patrol system and the way the outpost is structured and things like that. So those are Ranger events for a Ranger audience.
Yep.
Then another type of event would be Royal Ranger events that are for a broader audience. And it could be such as you just described, like your district powwow or district camp or whatever you call it, where it's a Royal Ranger event, but non-Ranger groups are welcome to come.
That's right.
Camporama is a good example of that. We've said for years, National Camporama is a Royal Ranger event. We don't hide that. That's clearly a Royal Ranger event. But a non-Ranger group could come to it. If a youth group or a boys group wanted to come, and if they still meet the other qualifications, yes, other groups can come.
But we call it the ultimate event for guys.
Yes.
And it's a great place for guys, dads, boys, just to come together and have a week just over the top of activities, shooting, competitions, you name it. It's all right there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Then the third type of event, and that's the one that's going to be kind of new to most of our districts, and that is, how can you conduct events that aren't necessarily branded Royal Rangers? You don't necessarily call it a Royal Ranger event, but it's an event for all boys. Now, can Royal Rangers go to it? Absolutely. But it's not. If you branded a Royal Ranger event, in other words, if you call it a Ranger event, put a Ranger logo on the door, put a Ranger logo on the flyer, there are going to be churches out there who don't have Royal Rangers that are just going to automatically dismiss it because they're going to say, well, we don't have a Ranger program, so it doesn't apply to us. And if you're trying to reach every boy in every community through every church, you've got to provide those events that are not going to have that roadblock that people are going to say, well, we don't have Rangers, so we're not going to go to it. So that's that third type of event, that it's a non-Ranger event, but it's for all boys.
Yes.
And there's a variety of ways you could do that. So, like for example, you could have a guy's day at the local ballpark or whatever. If you're in your district, you have a baseball minor league team or major league team or a football team or some kind of sporting event in your area that's popular with your guys. Go to the stock car races or the demolition derby or something. Have a day there where you can have all the men and boys in your district come to it. It's an easy event to organize. It's simple to do, but it's not a Ranger event. It's something. But Rangers can definitely come to it. So just helping our churches to see that we offer more than just Ranger events, that's important. So adding that third type of event is something we're going to have to look more at in the future. And the challenge is going to be finding time in the calendar, because many of our districts and even our outposts, we're busy, and sometimes we fill the calendar with so many events that it's hard to think, oh my goodness, how are we going to add something else? So you might have to look at it and say, what are we going to stop doing so that we can accommodate this type of event?
So, really I see this as the next iteration in our development or our evolution, if you will, to doing it. Years ago, we were just outdoors. And then we made the transition to realize that not every boy is an outdoor boy. So we added the competencies of trades and technology and sports and arts and ministry to the outdoor focus, because we wanted to reach all boys, not just boys that were outdoors. And now this is the next step, because we're saying we want to reach all boys in the United States of America, whether it's through Royal Rangers or not. And that's really what this is, isn't it? It fulfills the vision of our ministry. We stay true to our vision. We stay true to our ministry of what we were, which is obviously evangelize, equip, and empower. That's still the mission of who we are, and the vision of influencing more boys than ever, more effectively than ever.
Absolutely.
And so as a ministry, we're willing to say, in whatever way we have to, we're going to help you reach those boys, because those boys matter, and they have the right to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. As we say in the Every Boy Initiative, they have the right to develop into the man God created them to be. Every boy does. They have the right to develop the confidence they need to be able to make it through life and face the challenges of life that are going to be pretty tough anyway. Yep. And now we're going to put some practical tools in their hands. And then we're going to still develop that community of men and boys that they can be a part of, that will walk with them through the rest of their life and help them make it to the end, so that when it's all said and done, we've developed a Christ-like man in the most effective way possible.
Absolutely. And it's just like we said, like with the event we were talking about that we had a couple weeks ago at the Every One conference, we set our kind of our tagline for that event was reaching every boy and every girl, because
Right.
this was we also did with the Girls Ministries, to reach every boy and every girl through every church in every community. So if we're going to reach every boy, we can't do it through just the churches that choose to use a program like Royal Rangers.
Right.
We have to provide them with something else. So that's really crucial. But at the same time, we want to be real clear that we're not going to stop doing Royal Rangers. I mean, we're going to continue doing National Camporama. FCF is going to continue. We're going to continue doing all the things we're doing now. I mean, because that's, for many churches, the Royal Ranger program is exactly the thing that works well for them. I mean, that's the thing that works great in their community. It's popular. Boys, parents love it. They want to do it. Let's continue to do that. I mean, no one would want to take away something that's highly successful in those churches. So in those environments where it's working well, absolutely, we're going to continue to do it. And we'd hope all of our districts would continue to effectively do what they've been doing.
And we've, just not to interrupt you there, but we've seen a real uptick, if you will, of churches that at some time in the past had stopped doing Rangers that are right now coming back. And they're coming back in and saying, hey, we're not finding anything that does what Rangers did. And so we're seeing a significant uptick. In fact, I just had a district director, Derek, who called me, or sent me an email rather, and said, hey, I just want you to know, I just had two churches, conversation with two churches who were, coming back on board, if you will, for Royal Rangers and the ministry of that. So we're seeing that. But then, go ahead. The rest of that was...
No, that's true. That's absolutely true. So I mean, that's the thing that we want to be very clear about, is although we are providing resources and support and training and materials for those who want to do ministry to boys in some other format, that doesn't at all mean we're diminishing our focus on Royal Rangers. And we just have to be real clear, because sometimes people get the wrong idea that, we're moving away from Rangers to something else, and that's not it at all. We're just kind of expanding our boundaries.
Absolutely.
So that, and the benefit of doing this too is that we can really kind of let Rangers be Rangers. Let Rangers be what it is. Yeah. And let's celebrate what Royal Rangers is. Let's let Rangers be Rangers. And then for those churches who don't want to do Rangers, we give them something else.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
And that way both sides win.
And so to every one of you Royal Ranger leaders out there, number one, as I always like to say, thank you. Thank you for the passion you have to reach boys with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you for the dedication and the commitment you make week after week, because your efforts change the trajectory of that boy's life. And there are boys who are going to be in the kingdom of God because of your faithfulness. But I want to add to that, thank you for your willingness as we expand our focus to be able to say to churches, to pastors, to parents, to leaders, if you're not ready for Royal Rangers, our vision is mentoring boys. Amen. We're all about mentoring boys. And so we want you to know that if you're not ready for Royal Rangers, not a problem. We know that it's not for everybody. But if you want to know how to mentor a boy or how we can come alongside, we're ready to help you. Because our vision and our goal is to influence more boys than ever, more effectively than ever. So thank you so much for what each and every one of you guys do. Thanks for hanging out with us in this podcast. Hopefully this was able to clear up a few things and help you understand a little bit more about boys ministry and what our heart and our intent is behind that. And we appreciate each and every one of you.
Amen.
God bless you guys. Have a great week, and we look forward to catching up with you on our next episode of the Royal Ranger Podcast.